Hey, welcome to Sleep and Learn. Get comfortable, slow down, and just breathe. Before we start, tell me in the comments, where are you listening from tonight? All right, let's begin. Part 1. A small town, a strict father, and a boy who drew. Before we begin, let your shoulders drop a little. Let your breathing slow down. You don't have to do anything tonight. Just listen, and if your eyes close, that's perfectly okay. Tonight, you're going to hear the life story of Walt Disney, told in a calm, chronological way from his earliest years to the world he built. In this first part, we start with his childhood, his family, and the first sparks of the ambition that would later change entertainment forever. Walt Disney was born as Walter Elias Disney on December 5, 1901, in Chicago, Illinois. He was the fourth son in a family that would shape him in very different ways. His father, Elias Disney, was serious, hard-working, and often strict. Elias believed in discipline, early responsibility, and the idea that life should be earned through effort. Walt's mother, Flora Call Disney, was softer in temperament, warmer, and more emotionally supportive. Those two energies, pressure and comfort, lived side by side in. Not long after Walt's birth, the family moved to Marceline, Missouri. Marceline was small, rural, and quiet, surrounded by open land and simple routines. For Walt, it became a memory of calmness and charm that he would carry for decades. Later in life, he spoke about how deeply that town stayed inside him, and many historians believe Marceline influenced the idealized Main Street feeling that appeared in his later work. Even as a child, Walt showed a strong interest in drawing. He watched animals, people, and movement, and tried to capture it on paper. This wasn't just casual sketching. He wanted his drawings to feel alive. He copied cartoons, practiced faces, and learned how a single line could suggest emotion. Around him, the world was ordinary, but in his hands, it could become a story. The family eventually moved again, this time to Kansas City. Life there was harder. Elias bought a newspaper delivery route, and Walt and his older brother Roy had to help. They woke up before dawn, often around 4:30 in the morning, and delivered papers in all kinds of weather before going to school. Walt later said those years left him exhausted, and the routine was relentless. Yet it also trained him. He learned persistence, timing, and the habit of showing up even when he didn't feel like it. In Kansas City, Walt attended school but struggled to stay interested in traditional lessons. What held his attention was art. He took drawing classes when he could, including courses at the Kansas City Art Institute. He also worked small jobs, selling sketches and cartoons. The idea that his drawings could earn money was exciting, because it suggested art could be more than a hobby. As Walt grew older, the world moved toward war. When World War I was ending, he wanted to serve. He was too young to join the U.S. Army, so he forged his age and joined the American Red Cross as an ambulance driver. In 1918, he traveled to France. He drove ambulances, delivered supplies, and even covered his vehicle with cartoons, bringing humor into an exhausted landscape. The war ended soon after, and in 1919 he returned home with the feeling that his life needed to be bigger than Kansas City. Back in Missouri, he searched for work as an artist. He found a job at an advertising company, where he learned commercial illustration. That is where he met a talented young animator named Iwerks. Was quiet, technical, and extremely skilled with drawing speed and precision. Walt, by contrast, was social and ambitious. They became friends and creative partners, and together they became fascinated by a new magic: animation. In the early 1920s, animation was still experimental, built on hand-drawn frames and careful timing. Walt began making short animated films in Kansas City, including a small series called Laugh-O-Grams. He formed a company, hired a few artists, and tried to sell cartoons to local theaters. But money was unstable, and the business struggled. By 1923, the studio collapsed, and Walt was essentially broke. Still, even in failure, he kept moving forward. He packed his drawings, his film reels, and his hope, and he traveled to California. He was only in his early 20s, with almost nothing in his pocket, but he believed the future was waiting in Hollywood. And as you rest now, you can let that image settle softly. A young man arriving with a suitcase, carrying a dream he refuses to drop. In the next part, you'll hear how he meets his brother Roy, forms a new studio, and begins chasing a character that will soon become famous worldwide. For now, let your breath be slow and easy. You are safe, and sleep can come whenever it wants. Just let the night hold you, gently, like a hand on your shoulder. A lost rabbit and a mouse that changed everything. Take a slow breath in and let it go. You don't have to hold today in your hands anymore. Tonight, you can rest while the story moves forward, one gentle step at a time. When Walt Disney arrived in California in 1923, he was in his early 20s and almost out of money. He carried a suitcase, a few sketches, and a short film experiment he had made in Kansas City. That film was a blend of live action and animation, a little girl interacting with cartoon characters. It wasn't perfect, but it was proof that Walt could imagine a new kind of entertainment. He wrote letters, searched for meetings, and pushed the idea wherever he could. Eventually, he found interest from a New York distributor, Margaret Winkler, who was looking for fresh material. Walt proposed a series built around that live-action and animation mix. The project became the Alice Comedies, starring a real child in a cartoon world. But Walt could not build a studio alone. His brother Roy, older and more cautious, joined him. Roy had served during World War I, and he understood routine, paperwork, and the hard truth that dreams need budgets. The brothers formed the Disney Brothers Studio. Walt was the storyteller, the salesman, the restless spark. Roy was the stabilizer, counting every dollar, making sure the lights stayed on. The Alice Comedies gave the studio a starting income. They weren't glamorous yet, but they were consistent work. Walt hired a few artists, and one of the most important was Iwerks, the quiet, brilliant animator who had worked with Walt in Kansas City. Could draw quickly and cleanly, and he could solve technical problems with his hands. Together, the small team learned how to keep producing, week after week, while improving just a little each time. During this period, Walt met Lillian Bounds, an ink and paint artist at the studio. She was calm, practical, and quietly confident. Walt later said she could spot weaknesses in his plans and protect him from his own impatience. They married in 1925, and Lillian became an emotional anchor in a life that was often chaotic and overloaded. By 1927, Walt wanted a fully animated star, a character that could replace the slower Alice format. He created Oswald the Lucky Rabbit for Universal. Oswald was energetic, mischievous, and popular. The shorts were successful, and Walt believed he had finally found momentum. Then, in 1928, the momentum cracked. Walt traveled to New York to negotiate a better contract. Instead, he learned that the distributor, Charles Mintz, had quietly arranged to take control of Oswald. Mintz claimed the character belonged to the distributor and the studio system, not to Walt. Even worse, many of Walt's animators had been pressured to leave and work under the new arrangement. Walt realized he was about to lose both his creation and much of his team. It was a harsh lesson. In this business, ownership was power. Walt returned to California by train, carrying frustration and fear, but also a decision. If he could lose Oswald, he would make something no one could take. On that trip, he began thinking about a new character, something simple, friendly, and bold enough to survive. Back in Hollywood, Walt and Iwerks designed a mouse. Big, round ears, a small body, clear expressions, easy to recognize, easy to animate. Walt first called him Mortimer, but Lillian disliked the name and suggested something softer, Mickey. Mickey Mouse arrived quietly at first. 2 silent cartoons were made, but Walt needed something stronger to break through. Sound was changing films, and Walt wanted Mickey to speak through music and rhythm. So he produced Steamboat Willie, released in November 1928, one of the first cartoons to synchronize sound with animation in a way that felt exciting and modern. Audiences loved it. Mickey was suddenly a star. And Walt, who had just lost one character, now had a new one that belonged to him. Now, as you rest, imagine the feeling of that moment, a door closing and another opening. One loss and then a bright spark of victory. In the next part, Mickey grows into an empire, and Walt begins chasing something even bigger than a cartoon. For now, breathe gently. Let your eyes grow heavy. You're safe here, and the night can carry you. And if you're listening from bed, let the mattress support you fully. If you're listening with headphones, let the sound feel like a quiet light in the dark. You don't need to remember every date. You only need to feel the story drifting by, smooth and slow, while your breathing stays easy and your body relaxes deeper. Sleep is allowed now. Let it come naturally, one soft breath at a time, as the
Part
world
3,
outside fades away.
The Rise of Mickey.
Good night.
The first feature film, and a new kind of magic. As you settle in again, let your breathing become slow and natural. Your body already knows what to do. You don't need to force sleep. You can simply listen and let the story carry you gently forward. By the end of 1928, Mickey Mouse was no longer just a new character. Mickey was a breakthrough. And for Walt Disney, that success didn't feel like a finish line. It felt like permission to dream bigger. The early Mickey cartoons spread quickly. They were short, lively, and easy for audiences to love. But the real genius wasn't only the character. It was the system Walt was building around him. He focused intensely on timing, movement, and emotional clarity. Every action had to be readable. Every expression had to make sense, even without dialogue. He wanted animation to feel alive, not flat. As Mickey grew, Walt expanded the studio. More artists, more ink and paint workers, more cameras, more equipment, more pressure. The business became real. Roy handled finances carefully, because Walt was always reaching beyond what the studio could safely afford. Walt's hunger for perfection was expensive, but it also created quality the industry couldn't ignore. In 1929, Walt launched a new series called The Silly Symphonies. Unlike Mickey cartoons, these shorts were not focused on one star. They were experiments. They allowed the studio to test mood, pacing, music, atmosphere, and new animation techniques. Walt used them as a laboratory, and slowly, the studio's skill level rose. Then came one of the most famous leaps in animation history: color. In 1932, the short Flowers and Trees used a 3-strip Technicolor process that made animation look richer and more vivid than audiences had ever seen. It won an Academy Award. The studio received recognition not as a novelty, but as serious filmmaking. This mattered to Walt deeply. He wanted respect. He wanted animation to sit beside live-action films as a true art form. During the 1930s, Disney characters multiplied. Donald Duck appeared in 1934, with a sharper, funnier personality than Mickey. Goofy followed, clumsy and lovable. Pluto, a loyal dog, became another gentle companion. The studio wasn't building one star. It was building a universe of recognizable emotions. But Walt wasn't satisfied making only shorts. He wanted something no one had successfully done at that scale: a full-length animated feature film. People thought he was risking everything. Some called it Disney's folly. A 90-minute cartoon, they believed, would bore audiences. It would be too expensive, too hard, too risky. Walt didn't listen. He chose a fairy tale that carried strong emotion and clear imagery: Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. The production was exhausting. Animators studied real human movement. They filmed actors for reference. They worked on facial expressions, subtle gestures, believable weight, and lighting. Walt demanded countless revisions. Scenes were redrawn again and again until they felt right. Money tightened. Stress rose. Deadlines became terrifying. Walt pushed forward anyway. In December 1937, Snow White premiered, and it worked. The film became a massive success, earning huge box office revenue and proving animation could hold an audience for a full feature-length story. Walt received an honorary Oscar, 1 full statue and 7 smaller ones, a symbol of the dwarfs. The victory was more than financial. It changed the identity of the studio. Disney was no longer a cartoon company. It was a storytelling company. With new income, Walt invested immediately. He built a larger studio in Burbank, opened in 1940, designed for efficiency and growth. The building itself reflected his mindset: order, quality, control, and constant creation. But success carried consequences. Employees were under pressure. Workloads were heavy. Pay and recognition were uneven. In 1941, animators went on strike, demanding better conditions. Walt felt betrayed. The conflict left a lasting scar on his trust and his sense of loyalty. Still, the studio kept producing. Pinocchio and Fantasia arrived in 1940, both ambitious and technically advanced. Dumbo followed in 1941, simpler and cheaper. Then Bambi in 1942, emotional and beautifully animated. Now, as you rest, notice how the story grows. A mouse becomes a kingdom, a short becomes a feature, a small studio becomes an industry. In the next part, the world enters war. Walt's focus shifts, and the idea of Disneyland begins forming quietly in his mind. For now, let your eyes soften. Let your thoughts slow down. You are safe, and it's okay to drift while the story keeps moving, gently, into the night. Part 4. War Years, Reinvention, and the Dream of a Real Place. By now, your breathing might feel slower. Your body may feel heavier in the best way. That's good. You don't have to stay alert. You can simply listen, like the story is playing softly in another room. In the early 1940s, Walt Disney's world changed, because the whole world changed. The United States entered World War II after the attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941. Almost immediately, the Disney studio shifted its direction. Animation was still being made, but the priorities moved toward the war effort. The government requested training films, instructional shorts, propaganda, and morale-boosting material. Disney artists drew insignias for military units. Characters that once lived in fairy tales now appeared in uniforms, on posters, and inside practical films meant to teach real-life procedures. It was a strange transformation. The same hands that animated Snow White's delicate movements were now animating diagrams, warnings, and military messages. The studio stayed alive through this period partly because those contracts provided stability, but it wasn't the same kind of creative freedom Walt loved. At the same time, Disney's feature films were struggling financially. Pinocchio and Fantasia had been ambitious, expensive, and artistically bold, but the war cut off many overseas markets. Less international money meant less cushion. Walt had to think strategically, not only creatively. So the studio changed its approach. Instead of only huge, expensive fairy tale features, Disney began producing package films, feature-length releases built from shorter segments. Movies like Saludos Amigos and The Three Caballeros were shaped by this era, mixing animation with different styles and structures. They kept Disney visible and active, even when resources were limited. And through these shifts, Walt himself was also changing. He had always been intense, driven, and demanding. But after the 1941 strike, his trust in employees was thinner. He became more guarded, more cautious about loyalty. He still wanted perfection, but now he also carried a sharper awareness of conflict. Then, after the war years faded, the studio entered a period of rebuilding. In the late 1940s and early 1950s, Walt focused on getting Disney back to the kind of storytelling that had made the company legendary. Cinderella arrived in 1950 and became a major success, saving the studio financially and emotionally. It reminded audiences that Disney could still create classic magic. Then came Alice in Wonderland in 1951, and Peter Pan in 1953, continuing the return to bright, imaginative worlds. But while the studio was rebuilding on screen, another idea was quietly growing inside Walt. It started in a very personal place. Walt had daughters, Diane and Sharon, and he would take them to amusement parks and carnivals. He watched them ride attractions, and he noticed something. Many parks felt dirty, chaotic, careless. They were often designed for kids only, leaving parents standing around, bored and uncomfortable. Walt didn't like that feeling. He wanted a place where families could enjoy something together, a place that felt clean, safe, and beautifully controlled. Not only rides, but storytelling and physical space. At first, the idea was small, a park near the studio, a Mickey Mouse park, something modest. But Walt's ideas rarely stayed modest. The park grew bigger in his mind, like a drawing that keeps expanding as the artist refuses to stop. He began imagining themed lands, not just attractions, streets that felt like an ideal hometown, boats, trains, castles, jungles, rockets, a world you could walk into. To build it, he needed money on a scale he didn't have. So Walt did something extremely smart. He turned to television. In 1954, Disney partnered with ABC, launching a TV program that promoted Disney projects and helped finance the park. This was a new kind of strategy, blending media, marketing, and long-term vision. While some film people feared television, Walt used it as a tool. And slowly, the dream became real plans, real blueprints, real dirt being moved. In the next part, you'll hear the creation of Disneyland, its opening day chaos, and how Walt pushed even further, toward an even larger future. For now, just rest. Let your face relax. Let your hands feel warm and heavy. And if sleep is close, you can let it come quietly. Part 5. Disneyland, the impossible opening, and Walt's new obsession. Let your breathing stay gentle as you listen. Nothing needs your attention right now. You're safe, you're comfortable, and the story will move slowly, like a quiet train in the distance. By the early 1950s, Walt Disney wasn't only thinking about films anymore. He was thinking about a place. A real, physical world where stories weren't trapped inside a screen, but could be walked through. A place where parents didn't have to wait on a bench, bored and tired, while their kids rode something loud and messy. Walt wanted a park that felt clean, controlled, beautiful, and full of wonder. To make that happen, he created a new company in 1952 called WED Enterprises, named after his initials, Walter Elias Disney. This was where his Imagineers worked, designing the park like storytellers and engineers at the same time. He chose a location in Anaheim, California, on what had been orange groves. And the build moved fast. Too fast sometimes. But Walt was not the type to pause once he believed in a vision. He needed funding, so he used television in a way no one had done before. He made deals that tied his new park to a national audience. Shows like Disneyland and later the Mickey Mouse Club brought Disney into American homes every week, building excitement, trust, and familiarity. It was marketing, storytelling, and business strategy blended into one machine. And then, Disneyland was ready. Or at least, it was almost ready. Disneyland opened on July 17, 1955. That day became famous for being chaotic. The opening was meant to be a controlled event, invitation only, with limited guests and a smooth experience. But counterfeit tickets and confusion brought far more people than expected. The park was overcrowded. The summer heat was intense. Fresh asphalt on Main Street softened, and some guests' shoes sank slightly into it. Food and drink supplies ran low. Some water fountains didn't work properly. There were plumbing problems. And yet, despite all of it, something magical still happened. People walked down Main Street, USA, and it felt like stepping into a polished memory. They rode the Jungle Cruise, watched boats glide by, and saw Adventureland come alive. They saw Sleeping Beauty Castle, bright and perfect, rising like a promise. Walt stood there watching it all, and even through the stress, the exhaustion, and the imperfections, he could feel it. He had done something new.
Not a movie, not a character, a world. And once Disneyland succeeded, it changed everything. The park grew quickly with new attractions. Walt kept improving it, adjusting it, refining it. He cared about tiny details: trash on the ground, the look of a uniform, the tone of music, the height of a fence. He wanted it to feel like a story that never broke. But Walt was never satisfied with only maintaining success. He wanted more scale, more innovation, more control. And in the late 1950s and early 1960s, he started focusing on new technologies and bigger plans. He became fascinated with the 1964 to 1965 New York World's Fair, where Disney created major attractions for corporate sponsors. These projects weren't just fun, they were tests for the future. At the World's Fair, Disney produced experiences like It's a Small World, Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln, and other impressive displays. And the technology became part of Walt's next obsession: audio animatronics. He wanted robots that could move like people, not stiff mannequins. Realistic gestures, facial movement, presence. Walt wasn't only building rides anymore, he was building the idea that entertainment could become an environment, that technology could create emotion, that stories could surround you. And as Disneyland became a success, Walt turned his eyes to a place that could hold something even bigger than a park: Florida. A project so large it wouldn't just be an amusement park. It would be a new kind of city, a new kind of future. In the next part, we'll enter the final chapter of Walt's life, where his greatest dream grows and time begins to move faster than he wants it to. For now, let your mind stay soft. You don't have to hold the details tightly. Let them float by like gentle lights on a dark highway. And if your eyes want to close now, that's perfectly okay.